Okay, welcome back. This is Chapter 5, and Chapter 5 is about digital safety and security. Everything you ever want to know about how to keep yourself safe online. So we're going to start the way we always do. We're going to turn to page 202 and go over those learning objectives, right? Okay, so define the term digital security risk and describe the types of cyber criminals. Describe various types of internet and network attacks and explain how to safeguard against them. Discuss techniques to prevent unauthorized computer access and use. Explain the ways that manufacturers protect against software privacy. Discuss how encryption, digital signatures, and digital certificates work. Identify safeguards against hardware theft, vandalism. Explain the options for doing backups. Identify risks and safeguards associated with wireless communication. Recognize issues related to information accuracy, intellectual property, etc. And then discuss issues surrounding information privacy. Okay, so let's continue. On page 202, they start with some definitions. They talk about a digital security risk is any event or action that could cause the loss or damage to a computer, mobile device, hardware, software, data, information, or processing capability. So essentially, anything you do bad to a computer or the data is considered digital security risk. They kind of sort of start off with a list here, and they talk about, unauthorized use and internet attacks, and somebody steals your laptop, and somebody steals your disk, and somebody steals your credit card information. Then, of course, you just have the kind of acts of nature kind of thing. Anyway, all these are digital security risks. Some of them are man-made, some are not. Actually, this is not a very good diagram. There's really three classes of risks. You got the bad guys, you got Mother Nature, and then you got just ordinary people making stupid mistakes. Now, a lot of people think it's this last category that's more prevalent than the other two. And in my experience, that really is the case. Anyway, to continue. Any illegal act involving the use of a computer is labeled as a computer crime. So if you use a computer to perpetrate a crime, it's going to be labeled as computer crime. And they talk about cybercrime is the online or internet-based illegal act. Okay, so on page 204, they kind of go through a list of labels, and the labels are kind of dumb, mainly because it doesn't matter what you call them. All right, they talk about what is a hacker. And, in the old days, hacker was a pretty decent term. Hacker just meant that you were a computer enthusiast and you liked getting down and dirty into the computer. And, of course, the media has taken it over, and so hacker is now a bad term. I used to be a proud hacker, but now I can't call myself that anymore because people think I'm doing something illegal. They talk about a cracker. No one uses those terms anymore. It's pretty dumb. Then they talk about script kiddie. And really, to tell you the honest to God truth, the only place that script kiddie really gets used is when one hacker is trying to insult another one. They'll say, well, you're not a real hacker, you're just a script kiddie, implying that you don't really have the skills you need, that you have to follow along somebody else's work. Corporate spies. This is big business. Corporate espionage is probably greater than state-run espionage. In other words, companies are engaged in spying about as much as countries do. It's kind of wild. Unethical employees. Yeah, that's kind of big business. You could have an employee out there who just, gets pissed and decides to, post information out on the web from, your corporate database. Cyber extortion. That's when somebody goes in and they'll steal like the credit card data, and they'll say, if you don't give me $50,000, I'm going to release the list. It's an extortion kind of a thing to extort you to provide them money for stuff that they've done. And then, of course, the cyber terrorists, which is kind of sort of the same kind of a thing, except their goals aren't necessarily to get money. Okay, let's continue. So they talk about kind of sort of the types of, this is kind of a type of malware. And once again, the actual terms aren't really all that important. I mean, yes, you could classify malware in all these types of categories, but there wouldn't be much of a need for it. At your level, Bad things are bad things. Just don't really need to put them in categories. Let's go through this. So, a virus. So, a virus is some piece of software that, does damage of some sort. A worm is typically a piece of software that copies itself. It doesn't require, like a virus may need something else to pass it along, like you put a virus in an email, and so it has to have something to carry it from another machine to another. Either, in the old days it was floppy disks and stuff, but now it's, email and thumb drives. A worm is one that can reproduce itself over a network. A Trojan horse is, I think I'm running Notepad. It looks like Notepad, but when I double click on that, inadvertently launch some other piece of software that isn't what I thought it was. A rootkit. Rootkit is a kind of a special type of virus that kind of hides itself. And what it does is it installs into the operating system, and then so when you do a directory listing, it'll automatically detect itself and leave itself off the list. So, let's say the virus was in a directory and you did a dir on that directory, it wouldn't show up. It's smart enough to know where it is and to fool the operating system into never actually showing it. Cool stuff. Spyware, of course, is software put on there to track what I'm doing, where I'm going, what websites I'm going to, perhaps gather information like credit card information and passwords and things of that nature. Adware is not normally as malicious. It's typically some poor company trying to have pop-up ads to have you buy stuff, and so you'll get infected, so to speak, with adware. And all it really is just have an ad pop up and says, "Here, buy this product." So typically it's relatively harmless, although rather annoying. Okay, let's continue. So the definition of malware. Page 205, talk about short for malicious software consists of programs that act without the user's knowledge or consent, I added that, and deliberately alter the operations of the computer. So you may know it's there, but you didn't consent to it. Now here's the weird part. When you install some of this, you go to some shareware site and you pull down a piece of software and it pops up and says, do you agree with this license agreement? Well, first of all, no one ever reads those things, right? But if you did, perhaps down there it does say, hey, we're going to send tracking cookies, back to home base on what website you go to. It may actually say that. You probably will never read it, so you'll never know. So it's not necessarily knowledge and consent. I mean, you really have to give consent. You can't just say, it says so in the license agreement, so therefore I've consented. Not really. Okay, let's continue. On page 206, it gives some more terms. A botnet. Bot means, like robot, and net meaning I've got, instead of just me having one single virus attacking your machine, I could have infected 5 or 6 machines, and this could have been done months ago. Okay, so a month ago I infect 100 machines out on the internet, and then today I throw the switch, so to speak, and all these infected machines light up and start attacking some corporate headquarters or whatever. So a botnet is a group of machines acting in unison trying to accomplish some nefarious deed. Okay. One of the most obvious nefarious things that a botnet can do is what's called a denial of service. Let's say, for example, I've got a beef with Sears, and so I would infect 1,000 machines, and on one particular day I throw the switch and all 1,000 of them just beat the heck out of the Sears website, so that legitimate users can't get to the Sears website. They click on the Sears, and it just times out because no one can get to it because I've got 1,000 machines just beating the heck out of that web server, tying up all the resources. So a denial of service meant that I'm denying the legitimate users service to a particular website or something. Okay, cool. A backdoor. These are terms that developers use. For example, I'm in the middle of writing a piece of software and I want to be able to develop it and tweak it as it's in place. So instead of me having to go through and get permissions and do the right way, I've created a backdoor into the system that only I know, that I can sneak in and still get to. And most of the time, this is done for completely legitimate reasons, if it's done at all. A lot of this is folklore. And so the idea is that the developer could continue to work on something even after it's deployed without having to call the vendor up on the phone and say, hey, what password did you use? You could just do it without it. So the bottom line is, if those exist, people are going to find out about them, and then so bad guys can go in and use the back door and not have to have passwords into the system. Spoofing. Spoofing is fooling you into thinking something is what is not. And the most prevalent example is email spoofing. So I get spam email all the time. I get the one. Have you gotten the one from the U.S. Postal Service saying they attempted to deliver a package? Yeah, I've got one of those. And it says that, it's from the U.S. Postal Service, and we tried to deliver a package last Thursday, and click here to, to do something. I never got that far. But yeah, they want you to click on this link inside this email, which obviously is going to launch some sort of virus attack against you, so I never got that far. But it looked like it was coming from U.S. Postal Service, so they spoofed the return address, so to speak. And there's other types of spoofing. Sometimes there's IP address spoofing. It made it look like the request was coming from inside a corporate LAN, which would normally be an acceptable policy, but it's not. It's actually coming from the outside world. So there are two different kinds of spoofing. On page 208, they talk about a whole list of safeguards that you ought to go. And let's just kind of go through that list, but it's pretty doggone good. They talk about you should have an antivirus up and running. That makes sense, right? A lot of systems don't come with antivirus for some reason. Others come with antivirus, but perhaps it's not very robust, and perhaps you want to go with a third party. It's perhaps. Be suspicious on emails. Don't be a very trusting soul. Every time you get an email, you ought to be looking at it going, I wonder. Scan media. So if somebody gives me a thumb drive, I don't just immediately start clicking on files. I mean, I stick the thumb drive in and scan it first before I do anything. Implement a firewall, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail. But the firewall is basically something to protect me from the outside world. And then, of course, do backups. Back up all your data, because even in the best of conditions, something might go wrong. Okay, so let's talk about the firewall. So the firewall could be a software firewall inside your computer, that's fine. Or it could be a hardware firewall inside like a router. Now, I have both. Okay, so I'm running Windows 8.1, which has its own software firewall, which is pretty cool. And then I have a Brand X router hooked up to my cable service, and it has a hardware firewall. So I'm actually protected twice, I guess. And the way it works is things that happen inside my network, inside my home, particularly are not filtered or content tweaked in any way. So if I want to share a file between my laptop and my desktop, there's not going to be any issues in that whatsoever, because everything is allowed inside here. But if I was on the outside, if I went to my neighbor's house and then tried to connect to my network share, my firewall would prevent that. Inside my network, I can share files on all my machines all day long, but outside, can't do it, which is a good thing. That's right. I don't want people trying to get to my shared files on my machines. So cool. Let's continue. So on page 210, they talk about the difference between authorized access and use, and the terms are kind of simple. Authorized access is the use. Unauthorized access is the use of a computer or network without permission. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. Unauthorized use means I may have permission to do something, but I'm asking you not to. Now, this is kind of fraught with peril, right? I mean, if you have a 4-year-old and you have a bowl of M&Ms sitting on the coffee table and you tell the 4-year-old, don't eat the candy, wouldn't it be easier just to move the candy, right? If it's within their grasp, it's probably going to be a problem. Yeah. Okay, this is a good place to stop for the 15-minute mark. Let's pick this up again in just a few.